Who am I?
Richard Kazimer, media veteran.
Why I got in radio is because I'm good with a knife.
Contributor in Perth, Australia.
Our friend Richard Kazimer in the United States.
How are you guys enjoying the 19th century? Is that working out for you? How can you say, I'm not making fun of you as a race, I'm making fun of you as black performers?
I think as a country, Americans are as patriotic as the most rabid UK football hooligan.
Who am I?
Richard S. Kazimer.
Balls Radio with Phil Dobbie.
Let's go to the United States now, though. Richard Kazimer is our reporter over there. Now, Russia, sanctions against Russia over the Ukraine. It's all looking as though it could be a bit ugly. I guess the question is it really going to make much difference? And I'm assuming that is sort of like the big news item over there. I guess missing aircraft is probably in the news as well. But Russia and the Ukraine, is that the big story still?
That's pretty much it. Well, March Madness started up with the college basketball tournaments. It's March Madness, the missing airline, and sanctions against Russia. So yeah, you've got it straight. So
what's the view towards Russia then? Are they seen as being an aggressor? I mean, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, isn't it?
We're watching Putin with a close eye. There's just a lot of this old Cold War rhetoric that we're seeing going on. I don't think that there's any sort of panic in the streets here that we're fearing of any nuclear attacks or anything like that. You know, it's not like Bay of Pigs. We're just watching it. We've seen Putin do this before. It's pretty much business as usual. The rhetoric on this side of the fence, though, it's the absence of the military action against Russia rolling into Crimea in the Ukraine, that President Obama is now expanding sanctions against Russia. And what he's done is he's blacklisted a few bank officials and several businessmen with close ties to Putin. Russia, in kind, bars 9 prominent American officials like they care about entering Russia, including House Speaker John Boehner, Harry Reid of Nevada, the Democratic leader, John McCain, and some 3 close advisors to Obama. And ooh, can't you feel the tension with that banning? But in the world of the saber-rattling rhetoric that we hear all the time anyway, this really doesn't amount to much, but it does show Obama with a cooler head prevailing over the usual right-wing chicken hawk that we have here that are always calling for immediate military strikes on anything that moves over there. I mean, we still have people calling it the Soviet Union. Yeah. That's how backwards they are. Yeah. But, everybody's taking kind of a cooler approach to everything at the moment. It seems to be a general consensus from a lot of our European Union allies that Putin is just off the hook. He's a nut job. You've got people saying that he will roll into other countries, and other people saying that he will not do anything because he doesn't want to risk having his money shut off from these other countries buying fertilizer and buying fuel products from him.
So the belief is that the vote in Crimea was rigged then? Because I mean, when I said it was nuanced, I mean we did have a vote in the in Crimea. People were saying that they did want to go back to Russia. Does that count for naught?
It depends on who you listen to, actually, Phil. I mean, I hate to be vague about this, but it depends on what news source you're listening to. There are some sources that are saying that absolutely it was rigged, and then you're hearing other news sources that are showing pictures of people rejoicing that they wanted to be part of Russia. So nobody really knows, just because of the confusing media coverage that's going on over there, but that's par for the course anyway, and that's why you and I are doing these podcasts.
Yeah, well, we're just as confused. At least we know we're confused, though. We're here saying, look, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know, so let's move on. Now, this is an interesting one. This is an interesting philosophical question. So, Obamacare has a requirement that health insurance has to cover contraception. Yes. Very often, your health insurance is paid for by a company. That's often sort of like included in your package over there, isn't it? That you're getting health insurance. So what if the owner of that company doesn't believe that contraception should happen for religious grounds?
That's where we're at now. The Supreme Court is hearing arguments that corporations do indeed have the right to refuse health care coverage of contraceptives based on that head of the corporation's religious belief. Now, what this is, though, is it's not a monetary thing. This is really nothing more than another attempt at circumventing the Affordable Care Act that, as you said, mandates health plans have to cover a range of services at no extra charge, including birth control for women. You'll notice that no one's arguing against coverage of vasectomies or Viagra for men, which is also covered in the healthcare plans. Now, some of the businesses have sued the covering of contraceptives. They object to paying for all forms of birth control, but the companies that are involved in this particular case in front of the Supreme Court. They're willing to cover most of the methods of the contraception as long as that contraception doesn't include drugs and devices that they say may work after the egg has been fertilized. Some of the religious heads of these companies consider that as a form of abortion, and they don't want to be party to paying for abortion.
So what happens then? I'm confused by this. So if I've got health insurance and it covers contraception, then the employer says, well, we're not going to cover that. You can have the insurance, but it must remove that clause.
Yes, and that would come out of your pocket. They can pick and choose in their plan what would be covered. They can go to the insurance company that this company has and say, remove this from the coverage, and that would be out of pocket to whoever is being covered. This is, the government is saying that there's really no need to hear this because there are cases, it was the 1993 Religious Freedom Restoration Act that allows employers to invoke religious objections and opt out of these laws. The government is saying, look, there's really no need to do this because you can circumvent this. You can go around this, so it really doesn't need to be a blanket law across the country.
What the hell has a company got to do with my life anyway? I guess their argument is, well, we're paying for it. It's part of your salary package. We choose what you get. A
wonderful point, Phil, as usual, because what they have to do with you is that corporations think that they are above the law, that they are in this oligarchy that we have, that they are ruling. You work for them, therefore you have to adhere to their beliefs, their corporate beliefs, or their religious beliefs. Now, this is part of this ongoing slippery slope, going back to the 2010 Supreme Court Citizens United ruling that granted corporations personhood, that allowed corporations the same campaign contribution anonymity as an individual donor. Now they're applying the same religious rights now to a corporation as a person.
I'd see this slippery slope as saying, well, look, you had sex with a married woman. We found out about it. We are going to sack you because on religious grounds. I mean, where'd you draw the line on this? It could just carry on going down that avenue, couldn't it?
That is where it is going, because some religious fanatics feel that contraception actually allows promiscuity. Now, contraception is not, and was not even developed. The birth control pill was not even developed initially for birth control. It's for other women issues, maladies, and whatnot to regulate periods, things like that. This is uncomfortable for me to talk about and not become a medical professional. I love it. A couple of middle-aged men talking about women's periods.
People really go, these two don't know what they're talking about. I've always thought that. Now they really don't know what they're talking about.
The mindset is that if you give a woman birth control, that means she's free to have, so whether she's married or not, she's free to have sex with as many men as she wants without consequence. Therefore, that is the religious objection to birth control, as antiquated and as sexist as it is. Now, there is a concerted effort afoot to repeal the Citizens United, so we'll see where that goes.
Well, thank goodness we have big business to keep us on the straight and narrow, or probably more family businesses, I suspect, isn't it, the real problem? Now, free trade. America is all for free trade. I understand you are the land of the free, so exporting and importing goods without any barriers. I mean, surely that is the American way. Except when it comes to oil, it seems. If exporting oil is going to push the prices up, you're not too happy about that.
No. And there was a new poll by Reuters and Ipsos that showed that 77% of respondents think that the U.S. should not export oil drilled on U.S. soil in order to keep the prices low at the U.S. pumps, and that's up from 69% from last November. However, in reality, public opinion never has any effect on fuel prices or any prices whatsoever. The U.S. government is not now and has never been and has no intention of ever being in the oil industry. All the fossil fuel that is produced in the United States is the sole property of private companies, and they are free to sell it to whom they like at the highest price they can get. And that's it.
That's end of story. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So people surely get that, but I mean, there's an element of protectionism. This exists everywhere, doesn't it? Sort of like, if we've made it here and we can be self-sufficient in it, then the mentality is, even from people who, normally quite right-wing, They take this protectionist stance to say, no, let's keep it in our country. It's ours. It's American or it's Australian. It's part of who we are. So we should keep it rather than exporting it to those nasty people overseas. Very different view, of course, to the shareholders who say, yeah, just sell the stuff for the best price you can get so we get the best margins.
Well, exactly. And there's another example that's going on here, the Keystone Pipeline, which is very controversial. That's coming from the western part of Canada, and it's going to go down to the Gulf of Mexico, down to I believe, Louisiana, to the processing plants down there. And there's this ongoing battle of whether or not we should have this pipeline that's going to bring this crude oil down into the processing plants. And there's, not a drop of that oil that we are going to allow that's going to go across aquifers. And if there should ever be a break, which we seem to have on a weekly basis here, that oil would seep into the aquifers of, I believe, like North Dakota, South Dakota, and a couple of other states, ruining it forever. None of that oil is going to be here in the United States. The Canadian company that owns it, the Chinese that are supplying the pipeline, none of that money is ever going to come to the United States. But you get people on the right that think this is the greatest thing since sliced cheese. So we'll see where that goes. And everybody else needs to understand that gas prices are based on speculation, not supply and demand. So, as I was saying, if the EU imposes sanctions on Russia for Ukraine in the form of not buying Russian petrol products, and that's one of Russia's primary sources of revenue, our U.S. oil exports will increase, thus decreasing our supply and increasing the prices at the pump. Who wins, Phil? The oil companies, of course.
Yeah, always. And it's interesting, isn't it, what you're saying about carrying oil over large distances with possible calamitous effects. On their spreadsheets, they will have not written in the value of that risk as in being, destroying a local economy, possibly forever. I mean, they are risk adverse from that point of view.
Yeah.
Somehow it's not factored in. So, because if it was factored in, they'd be thinking twice before building the bloody thing.
I think the bigger question is that why in the 21st century, why in 2014, we're still relying on some dirty ick from the ground as an energy source. I can't figure that out. No,
well, neither do I, as I drive around in a self-righteous manner in my Prius. I still use a bit of fuel, but not as much as everyone else. Fred Phelps, the founder of the Westboro Baptist Church. God bless his soul, he's dead. But for some people, they may actually see that as a good thing, because he was for a man of the church, he spread a lot of hate, that's for sure.
Well, let's define church. Fred Phelps was nothing less than a cult leader of this pseudo-religious Westboro Baptist Church, which is out of Kansas. He was probably one of the most reviled, most despicable, and dare I say hated people in the United States. Phelps spent a good part of his pathetic life producing 13 children that padded his congregational numbers. That was made up primarily of the families of 9 of his kids. Their sole mission, Phil, was to troll the country, demonstrating at funerals with signs and nasty taunts to the poor people, messages rejoicing in the deaths of those people from AIDS, homosexuals, hate crime, murders. They were even protesting at funerals of fallen Afghanistan soldiers and Iraqi soldiers. Just about anybody they felt didn't hate gays as vehemently as Phelps felt his version of God intended. Signs that said, "God hates fags. Thank God for dead soldiers." That was the sole intent and sole purpose of Fred Phelps and his congregation. A despicable, hateful, vitriolic piece of Fred Phelps.
And that's right. That could be the new term for shit, can't it? Basically, we'll just go, because you can't use the shit word on the radio. We'll just say Fred Phelps. But I wonder where he's gone. Heaven or hell? Place your bets, or neither. We won't answer that question as to whether there's a higher plane. We'll save that for another week. But interestingly, and I've not spoken a lot about this, but my father-in-law passed away in the last week. He was a great man. And an American, so it can exist. You can be a great man and American. And interestingly, he's having a church service this week, which is being conducted by the minister from Gosford Anglican Church. Now, Gosford Anglican Church would be the opposite of the Westboro Baptist church in that it gets a lot of Facebook hits because he uses his church sign outside for inclusive messages, particularly for gays. So, for example, one of his signs was, Jesus had 2 dads and he turned out okay.
That's wonderful.
So he is the opposite of Fred Phelps. You know, Tony, please stop calling asylum seekers illegals. I don't like it. God, you can't you can't argue against that, can you? Really, you know, if the big man's talking to you through the Gosford Anglican Church, you've got to listen.
So many people had every right to protest at Phelps' funeral, back at you, in your face kind of stuff. But I did see a picture the other day of some people that were out in front of Phelps' congregation, in front of his church, with a huge sign that said, "Sorry for your loss." You know, people are taking the moral high ground on this, and to their credit, finally, the media is pretty much ignoring his passing.
Interesting that he had a congregation that included his family of 13. That is a sign, isn't it, that his insurance didn't cover contraception. I could have fixed that up. Good to. Do you like the way I tied all that together?
You're a genius, brother.
Richard Kazimer, good to talk. See you again
all
next
right,
week.
take care.
Balls Radio with Phil Dobbie.